Sitting across from you at the dining room table or walking through your kitchen or stomping around up and down the stairs, you find yourself with a teen boy in your home and you wonder, how did we get here? I remember him as this little boy that I could carry around, and depending upon his age, he might now be able to carry you around. It's a really strange feeling for a mom, and it takes some time to get used to. We had this little boy, and now they've grown into a teen, and we can't even imagine the fact that they're going to continue to grow and mature, and someday they'll be a man. They are on their way to that. They are at that middle point right now. What is my best advice for raising boys? And then what do we do when sometimes those bad attitudes creep up during the teen years and they're trying to exercise their freedom, their independence, and their initiative? But we have to balance that. So today I am going to talk about those couple of topics, and I'm excited about it. I'm don't usually touch on this kind of stuff, but I've been asked a few times about it and thought that I would turn it into an episode for you. So here we go.
Welcome to Little by Little Homeschool Podcast, where you'll learn tips and strategies that will empower you to home educate your children. I'm Leigh, a homeschool mom of over 12 years, which includes 2 graduates. When I started homeschooling, I was pretty much on my own and was desperate for encouragement and help. My mission is to be a source of encouragement and help to you. Whether you are just beginning your homeschool journey or you're deep into the homeschool lifestyle, Little by Little Homeschool wants to help you stay the course, because all the time you are investing into your children is completely worth it. If you're ready to take your homeschool to new levels, keep listening.
Today's episode is going to be broken up into 2 parts. You might find yourself with young boys in your home right now and say, oh, I don't need to worry about that teen stuff right now. But I'm going to encourage you to listen all the way through this episode and to also go back into all the episodes that I have and listen to the other ones where I talk about teens, because to raise and to parent teens well, you need to be intentional before that. I do have a specific entire episode about relationship, and I'm going to drop that in the show notes. I forget the title of it, but I will drop it in the show notes for you. I encourage you to listen to that, because if we're not thinking ahead, then all of a sudden we'll be caught in something and be like, oh no, what am I supposed to do now? Now that's going to happen anyway. There's going to be situations. There's going to be things that are going to arise with raising children, and especially as you raise teens, that you weren't expecting. And you have to cross that path when you get to it. But there's a lot that you can prepare for within your relationship, and you can also prepare your mind and your heart, especially as moms. I know dads oftentimes are like, well, of course they're going to grow up. And moms are like, no, I thought they were going to stay my little boy forever. Right now, as of recording this episode, I have 2 boys that are I don't have a teen. I don't have 2 teens anymore. My older son recently turned 20 years old. So even though I've been calling him a young adult because he's living and acting like a young adult as opposed to maybe what you would think of a typical American teenager life. So I have a 20-year-old and a 16-year-old. And I grew up with 3 brothers. I am very familiar with boy life, and I have read a lot of books all through the years about raising boys, and it is very different. I don't care what anybody says. It is very different than girls. Now, personalities can make it seem like it's not as different, but it can be with different personalities. And I found in my life, raising my daughter was very different than my boys. And I've also watched and observed many families over the years who have boys and just kind of watched how they raise and how they parent, and to then see what the outcome of that is. And so I'm going to today kind of compile all of those things together. And today actually also is my husband and I, James. It is our 24th wedding anniversary. And I'm like, how in the world do we get 24 years of being married? So anyway, we're going to celebrate some of that today. And we did a little bit over the weekend. And oftentimes when you have older kids, you spend that time maybe running around and doing things. But I think we might be able to sneak away at least for maybe dessert tonight. So that's kind of exciting news for us. Now, there are entire books all about raising boys. And I did an episode with Dorinda Wilson, and I can link that in the show notes too for you, all about raising boys. And that was a great episode. She's got a book about it. Another great author that I have really enjoyed is Dr. Meg Meeker, spelled Meeker. Apparently, she has a podcast as well. So I read a couple of her books way back, and they were very, very foundational to how I approached raising my boys. Because even though I say I had 3 brothers, we were at school all day. And so therefore, I didn't see them all during the day. And it's different when you homeschool and when you're parenting because you are parenting them 24/7. They aren't leaving the house for 6, 7, 8 plus hours a day. Even if they do go to activities or sports or something, you still are the main director of their day and you still parent all of that time. All that to say, look at this episode as a big overall view. Like we're taking like a high view of this, and I'm just going to give you some main points. And obviously, this could all be broken down into very specific episodes for almost every single one. But we're going high level here, and then you see how that's going to be implemented in your life. And don't feel like you have to do everything all at once. Figure out where maybe something is missing and what actually will work well for you in your home. First thing that I have definitely found with boys is that you have to establish clear boundaries, but then you have to expect them to test it. And then you have to decide which boundaries are very firm and which are not. And that really is specific to you and your husband and your family and your vision for your family and your family culture. But just know that you have to establish clear boundaries. They need to be very clear for the boys. They need to say, you need to be able to say, this is what you can do, this is what you cannot do. But do not say, you cannot do this, don't do this, but without an explanation. Give them reasons. Now, there are going to be times when they are young and they're going to do something. We don't need to explain to them before we pull them out from running across a busy road. We don't have to stop and say, this is why I don't want you to run across that road. No, we grab them and we pull them back to safety. So there are times where we have to just act and there is no explanation. And then afterwards, you have that conversation. You pull the child aside to a safe place and you say, I pulled you out of there because look, and you stop and you look and you see the dangers of the highway or the busy road. Obviously, hopefully, you're not near a highway running across a highway. I know that's a very easy example to give, but there are times where we just have to run in and rescue and save them and explain afterwards. But there's a lot of proactive conversations that we can have in establishing those boundaries, but then expect them to test it because they are testing their mental and physical fortitude all at all ages, whether they're 1 years old or they are 18 years old. They are testing that. We have to remember that someday our boys are going to be men, and we want them to be men who are strong, soft when needed, but strong enough to lead a family. And that's what you're doing is setting that foundation and allowing them to kind of test it a little bit and not to get irritated that they're testing it because someday they may encounter a situation where that testing it is actually the right thing to do. Balance all that they do with allowing them to test their physical, mental, and emotional limits. They have limits that are far beyond what they think they have at limits. You have limits for them that are much lower than their limits. If they're not able to test themselves physically, they don't know what they can handle. They don't know how they can persevere further. If they're not able to test their mental abilities, if you come in and rescue them every time they're having a hard time with a math problem, they're not going to know that they can push beyond that, that they have a mental fortitude even beyond that, and that will continue to grow. And growing and like testing this kind of stuff and allowing them to do that is good. Keep in mind that big picture. You are working yourself out of a job and you are now raising right now a boy that is going to grow into a man who is going to lead a family. And we want him to be a strong leader. So allow him to push and to test how far can he go physically, how far can he go mentally, and how far can he go emotionally. Obviously, this all depends upon age and it all depends upon maturity. Keep in mind, as I've said before, that you have boys right now in front of you. They might even be teen boys, but most of their lives are going to be lived as men. Most of their lives are going to be lived as adults, which is a crazy thing to actually, if you stop and you think about it. And if you're having a hard time comprehending that, think about yourself as an adult with your parents. You're going to spend most of your life as an adult in relation to your parents, not as a child. So keep in mind that they're going to spend most of their life as a man. Respect is a really huge thing when it comes to boys, and especially so in the teen years. them knowing that you respect them, that you stop and you listen. There isn't just the yelling and screaming about things. There isn't the berating. There isn't the belittling. And so, one thing I really found with this respect thing is that you need to watch how you interact with their peers, with their friends, and also how you talk about them. Don't talk trash about your boys, your teen boys, your young adults to your friends or to coworkers or to other homeschool moms. Now, this doesn't mean that we don't have conversations that are hard with maybe a really close friend that we can confide in and that we can really trust. I encourage you to do that. If you are struggling in an area with your boys or with your teen boys, especially, have those conversations, but with somebody that's going to have those boundaries and they're not going to go and talk about your child to somebody else. The amount of times that I hear parents trash talking, bad mouthing their kids, making fun of their kids, I just can't even imagine. I know there's entire social media accounts and probably YouTube accounts and people who possibly even make money off of making fun of their kids maybe specifically, and maybe their kids are young, but can you imagine getting older and finding those videos of your parents making fun of you? Like, wouldn't that devastate you? So same thing, if your children overhear you talking about them or they find out that you're talking about them, how much will that hurt them? And especially for boys, they want to be respected. They want to be looked up to. Now, yes, some of that respect is earned by taking initiative and helping out around the house and by being a part of the family, but just watch how you balance that. And obviously, they are not in the home on equal footing as their father. And this is where dad really needs to step in, especially with boys. I would say around the age of 12. I remember my husband saying, so all our oldest was younger than 12. And at that time, an older gentleman, probably the same age as my husband is now, said to James that you just wait until they get to be about somewhere between like 10 and 11. And he was like, they are going to be on you all the time. They are going to be following you around. They're going to want to know what you're doing. They're going to want to be a part of everything that you do. Now, this doesn't mean that they didn't beforehand. It just intensified. And so we started to see that. We're like, okay. And by the age of 12, what we did, James and I decided to do a call to manhood ceremony. And part of it was with the entire family on their birthday when they turned 12. But then part of it was something that he actually specifically did with our sons. And we made that formal transition at 12, where I, up until that point, I was holding the reins when it came to directing and guiding and raising them. And around that age of 12, I began to turn that over to James. Now, they still would kind of run back to mom, but I'm going to tell you right now that, yeah, they come to me for things. They'll go to dad a lot too. If they need advice for something, so my 20-year-old who owns his own business, if he needs some type of advice or he needs something like that, he will go to his dad and ask him. I'm not necessarily always the go to. I'm the soft place to land. I'm the place at the end of the hard day that they can just kind of relax and let go a little bit. And I can be the encouragement and the smile that they need. But dad needs to begin to take the reins. Often, when I have heard of stories and concerns and issues and troubles in the teen years, it's because dad has not taken the reins. And sometimes dads don't know how to do this. And it's something that in the beginning we need to pray about and to pray for him to find leadership in that way and to find guidance and find others to come alongside him. But dad has to take the reins, especially as boys get to be bigger. If that is not established, if that relationship between you and your son is not solid and they don't respect and love you back as well, as they get bigger, they will be bigger than you. Both of my boys are bigger than me. My 16-year-old, he was laying on the couch and I just kind of came and I was sitting next to him kind of talking and I just kind of like was like trying to tickle him a little bit, in his armpits and then, the bottom of his feet. And literally with his one hand, he grabbed both of my wrists and I couldn't move my hands. I couldn't get my hands out with his one hand holding both of my hands. And so you will get to that point, and that's what we want. We want our boys to grow into men, not just in character, but in physical stature, so that they physically can provide. Before we close this out, before it gets too heavy here, I want you to laugh, and I want you to laugh often with boys. I have had so many hilarious moments with my boys, and sometimes I'm like, "I should not be laughing at this," and now that they're older, I will say, "You know I should not be laughing at this," and they're like, "Yeah," and they still do, but when they were young, I would have to, like, hold my laughter in and go around the corner and laugh a little bit because it really was funny, but overall, that's not gonna serve them well in life, so we need to use it as a teachable moment, but there's a lot of times where you can laugh, and you can laugh openly. We just have the best time. My boys are just so funny. My daughter currently is not living at home, so it's just a boy house here right now, and it's just funny. So laugh and laugh often. Do not be afraid to laugh at them. You don't have to be a sourpuss. You don't have to have a straight, strict face all the time. I have found that with the younger years, with the boys, it was exhausting and hard, but the teen years are a blast, even though there are hard times and there are hard conversations and there are clear boundaries that have to be set and to be reset. It still is such a blast raising teen boys when you have that relationship established in the younger years, where there is an equal respect between the two of you. Maybe not always equal because they need to respect you a little bit more. And I find that my boys now, who are young men, who I had spent so much time protecting and leading and guiding, we would go out places. Where are they? Keeping an eye on them, making sure that they don't wander off, make sure that nothing happens to them, and constantly be worried about in a good way, not in like in a crazy, not in a way that's over beyond my boundaries, but being concerned and making sure that I knew where they were at all times when they were younger for their safety and for their protection. The tide has turned, and I will go places with my boys, and they're kinda keeping an eye out for me and watching to make sure that I'm okay. I'm like, "I am totally fine." Like, I've been out in the world for a while. It was probably about a year ago or so, I took all 3 of my kids, and we went to Niagara Falls, and I use it as I mean, it was a great day. We had a great day, but I also use it as an opportunity to kind of watch my boys, especially at that point, my 19-year-old. He had spent about 4 months out of the country, and then I think that really made an impact on him as far as being aware of your surroundings and watching, for things and needing to be careful of your safety, and just watching him as he was trying to watch and, to protect me and his sister as well. Nothing happened, but it's just been in interesting to watch that. Now, let's switch over to the second part of this episode. And if you don't have a teen boy, I'm going to remember, I'm going to encourage you to continue listening to this so that you have this stuck in the back of your mind. And when things come up, you will have a little bit of basis of a little bit of ground to go on. You're not completely blindsided. But what do you do when your teen boy has a bad attitude? First thing I would recommend is don't take it personally. If you overall have a good relationship with them, they aren't usually trying to be vindictive. We talk about girls and hormonal changes, and we know that that's a thing. Guess what? It's a thing for boys too. But a lot of them will hold it in and they process it differently. And it can come out as just a negative attitude towards mom because you are their safe space. You are the person that they know that if they were to give a bad attitude to, you're not going to go anywhere. You're still going to be there. They know that they can count on and rely upon you because you have been there. So don't take it personally. However, it's not an excuse. Hormonal changes or whatever's going on is not an excuse. We need to help teach them how to process their emotions so they don't come out as bad attitudes and they actually can work through that. Some boys are going to be a bit more talkative and they need to talk through it. Some have to just work through it in their head. And so you have to figure out how do they process things and how can I help them? How can I come alongside them and encourage them and give them the tools that they need in order to process their thoughts and their emotions so that it doesn't come out as negative towards you. So don't take it personally, okay? But choose your battles wisely. Not every single bad attitude needs to be a big lecture. There's some memes and things out on Instagram, and I'll show my boys. It's like, I told my mom a funny this latest one was like, I told my mom a funny story and it turned into an hour-long lecture, and I was just trying to be funny or something. Or, it was something about like they had done something, and we laughed about that because that has happened. And sometimes it's appropriate. But sometimes it's better off just to kinda let something slide, and then maybe it needs to come back, later on, maybe a time that's more appropriate to talk about it, instead of when the bad attitude is at an all-time high. let's go back to when I was talking before about dad. Let's defer to dad. If my boys, especially during homeschool, were consistently uncooperative, I would simply say to them, "Do you need to have a conversation with dad?" Guess what? That typically cleared everything up. They would say no. They didn't want to have a conversation with dad because they knew dad was going to call them to something higher, and they knew dad was right. They respected dad. There was a healthy fear, we'll say. It wasn't a fear out of what is he going to do to me, but knowing that that was not going to be a fun conversation. And so they would then turn around a little bit. They would straighten up a little bit. Now, there were years where my husband worked outside of the home, and he works from home now, and he has for the past 9 years. So during that time, that conversation with dad could happen immediately. They knew that I could send them to his office, and they could have that conversation, and before that would be a conversation then when dad came home. But either way, it wasn't a conversation that they necessarily wanted to have. And so they realized that the ball was in their court. It was up to them to step up and to be cooperative. Don't stop connecting with your son. If he's struggling with a bad attitude, don't stop connecting. You keep showing him God's love, and you keep demonstrating good character during this time. Don't stop connecting. Still ask if he wants to go out and get some ice cream. Ask if he wants to go run some errands with you. Ask him if he can help you out with dinner. Ask him if he wants to sit and read a book, or maybe he likes to draw and want to sit and draw here in the living room by the fire while I read a book. Just something. Don't stop connecting with him. Talk to him about it too. Have discussions. Tell him about the hormonal changes, but tell him that it is not an excuse and it's not a free pass. When you talk to him about his bad attitude, do not do it when he is demonstrating a bad attitude. Wait until there is a time where you feel like he's good and open. And maybe this means, hey, do you want to run out and get some hot cocoa tonight? Or do you want to, I know it's getting cold now. It's getting here. It's the fall. We're getting close to winter. So I'm thinking of those types of activities, but it could just be, do you want to go bowling? Do you want to go roller skating? I don't know. I'm trying to think of something indoors, but whatever it is, maybe take him somewhere. Let his guard down a little bit and say, hey, you know what? I've seen you struggling with a bad attitude, and let's talk about that. It's affecting me, it's affecting the family, and I want to know what all's going on and have those conversations. Sometimes you might need to just give him an out at the time. When you see the bad attitude, especially if it's during homeschool time, you might need to say something like, "Hey, buddy, why don't you take a 5-minute walk outside and then come back in when you're feeling ready to finish up your math lesson?" Sometimes they might say, "No, I'm fine. I'm going to just do this math lesson." And you'll notice that it's getting worse and worse. There are times I said, "No, that was my nice way of asking. Now I'm not asking. Now I'm telling you to go take a walk." And there were times I didn't care what the weather was. Go take a walk. There is something about getting outside, fresh air, whether it's raining, snowing, sleeting, or it's sunny and it's a beautiful day outside. There's something about that that can really just refresh our minds. And they would come back feeling renewed. So don't be afraid to give them an out and say, "Hey, let's take a break here." Maybe it's more than 5 minutes. Maybe it's like, "Why don't you come back in 30 minutes?" Maybe they need to go in their room and read a book or draw, or they need to go outside and throw some, and get the basketball out, or they need to swing the golf club a bit. Just oftentimes, especially for boys, some type of physical activity will help them reset. And let's close this out and remember again that you are raising a man. You're not raising a boy. And he has to learn how to manage his emotions and his negativity. That doesn't mean he stuffs it all in. That doesn't mean he has to hold it all back. And some, I mean, it's just obvious. Some men will hold things in much longer, and some don't need to process much, and some need to process more. And so we need to look at them individually and then show them appropriate ways to be able to process those emotions. And giving you a bad attitude and just causing your days to be bad, that's not the way of dealing with it. So I hope that this episode has encouraged you. If you are looking to connect with some like-minded homeschool moms who are homeschooling their kids of all different ages, we would love to have you over in the private Facebook group. You can join by checking out the link in the show notes. We'd love to have you a part of that. Go ahead and invite your homeschool mom friends because we would like to meet them there as well. Thank you for sticking around for today's episode. I hope that it has blessed you, and I can't wait to see you over in the Facebook group.
Thank you for listening, friend. I'd love to connect with you more. You can find social media links in the show notes and share this episode with a friend who could use a boost to her homeschool. See you back here real soon.